I'm Phil Hellmuth Jr., and in this lesson we're going to talk about one of the most commonly misunderstood concepts in poker, pot odds. Why are pot odds important? Because they help us analyze when we're getting the right price to call a bet with just a draw, and to set a price that makes it wrong for our opponent to call our bets when they're drawing. So, with that in mind, let's start by defining what pot odds really are. To put it simply, pot odds are defined as the odds you get by comparing the size of the pot with the size of the bet you need to call. For example, let's say your opponent bets $10 into a pot of $90. The action moves to you, and now you have to call just $10 in order to win $100. The $90 in the pot and your opponent's $10 bet. This translates into pot odds of 10 to 1, which are very juicy indeed. So, now that we know what the pot odds are, the question is, how do we make use of them to make a decision about a specific hand? It's a very simple three-step process. First, we calculate our pot odds like we did just a minute ago. Again, 4th grade math, maybe 2nd grade. Second, we estimate our odds of winning the hand at the showdown. And third, we compare the ratios. If the pot odd ratio is greater than our chances of winning the pot, we make the call. If it's lower than our chances of winning the pot, we fold. Now, of course, implied odds, which we'll talk about a little bit later, suggests that even if you're not getting the right odds, you can bet on the river and your opponent will call, probably. And so sometimes in a close situation you might want to make the call because you know if you make your hand, you get to make a bet and it'll probably get called. That's just simply called implied odds. Now, let's take a look at an example of what I'm talking about, what I'm teaching you here. In this hand, let's say your hero, that's you, is holding the King 8 of hearts. And the board has come Queen, 10, 5, 6 with 2 hearts. With $1,500 in the pot, our opponent bets $500. Should our hero call? First, let's calculate the pot odds. Our hero must call $500 to win $2,000, giving him pot odds of 4 to 1. With only a flush draw, we have 9 outs with 1 card to come. Basically, there's 46 unknown cards left in the deck, 9 of which are hearts, because we know your 2 cards and we know the 4 on the board. Thus, our ratio of outs that will give us the flush relative to the total number of cards in the deck is 46 to 9, or a little bit better than 5 to 1. Since the pot odds of 4 to 1 is less than our hand odds of making the hand of 5 to 1, we can probably fold. We probably should not call the 500. Now, implied odds might make it a little bit closer. Now, even though the math here is indisputable, we do have to remember that we're making some assumptions when it comes to estimating our total number of outs. If our opponent in the previous hand had trips, one of our 9 flush outs would be gone. That's because, the 5 of hearts or whatever wouldn't do any good, meaning that we'd only have 8 outs instead of 9. Then, if we make our flush on the river, our opponent could still make a full house if the board pairs. In other words, don't make your decision in a vacuum. Something else about that is when you have the King 8 of hearts in that spot, you might actually hit a king. That might actually give you 3 more outs in some examples. So that would be 12 outs instead of 9. Anyway, when calculating your outs, give some thought to your opponent's range of possible holdings and adjust your number of potential outs to account for any of the dead cards. One final thing to remember is that tournament pot odds aren't always the same as cash game pot odds. In a cash game, you're always getting true odds, which means if you are risking $50 to $100, you're always getting 50 to win $100. You're always getting late odds of 2 to 1. In a tournament, the relative value of your chips changes as you get near the bubble, the money bubble, man. You want to cash. The bubble is not a good place to be. That means that maybe they're paying 28 players and you finish 30th. And the true bubble is 29th. God, I hate being on the bubble. All right, basically this means the value of the chips that you lose can be more than the value of the chips you win, because you're talking about cashing versus non-cashing, a concept we will discuss in greater detail in Lesson 8.